Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual seminar. My name is David Aikman. I'm the director of the Qatar Centre here at King's Business School, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Sinem Hacioglu from the Bank of England to give today's talk, which is joint work with Diego Kaenzig and Paolo Surico from London Business School. One of the research themes we're keen to push at the centre is the use of big data and data analytic techniques. And Sinem's paper that she's going to talk through is right on the money from that perspective. She's going to be using payments data from a Fintech company to understand the response of consumption of UK households in recent months. So really kind of topical and exciting talk. Before I hand over to Sinem, just a word or two about kind of rules of the game for the talk. So we have a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So if you have questions as Sinem's presenting, please do feel free to use those. Use that function to raise your questions. We'll try and leave 15 minutes or so at the end for a wider discussion. And if you'd like to kind of raise your question directly, pose your question directly to Sinem via audio, all you have to do is use the raise your hand function, and I will kind of hand the audio over to you to raise your question. Let me stop there and hand over to Sinem. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and also Francesca for inviting me to present this paper. I really appreciated the invitation as we were working on the paper. So it is a good opportunity to get how everybody feels about it in terms of what it is covering, but also our results. So I would really appreciate the opportunity to present it. And as David mentioned, this is joint work with Diego, a wonderful PhD student at LBS, and Paolo. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Paolo's work. He has been working on COVID-related issues in the last couple of months, but also before that, he has been working on household finance. And before I go on, as now you know that I'm affiliated with the Bank of England, so our results and the views expressed here are our own, and they do not reflect any of Bank of England's or its committee's views. And this talk, with our paper currently, we name it as Consumption in the Time of COVID-19, Evidence from UK Transaction Data, but it actually covers more than that. So let me go through what we do in the paper. First, I will start by stating the obvious, and with the risk of annoying you all by showing you some headlines from mostly Financial Times, but whatever platform you are reading your news on, I'm sure these kind of news were covered up to some extent. UK consumer spending dropped over a third during lockdown. If you look into different categories, you will see different amounts of drop, or some categories increase over time. For example, online shopping, which is no surprise to anybody. But at the same time, there were news about income inequality also rising. Income inequality in the UK was already not great before the COVID-19 crisis. And it was definitely by coincidence that I found what Andy Haldane, the chief economist at the Bank of England, said recently about pre-existing inequality getting worse during the COVID crisis due to poorest parts of the country being hit hard, or insecure jobs, or lower amount of savings already in the bottom of the income distribution. So in this paper, we are doing some descriptive work. I'm not going to be showing you any regressions. I will be showing you quite a lot of charts, technically, of data, and how we are able to see what is happening to transactions in consumption, and also what's happening to income. And combining these two, both consumption and income, will be looking at people's financial positions and heterogeneity in their finances. And I will touch upon the rising inequality towards the end. And we will do so by looking into a high frequency transaction data, as David also mentioned in the beginning, because at the end, we would like to understand individuals' behaviors. And of course, survey data, other national statistics give us some idea about what people are doing. But high frequency transaction data is actually telling us exactly what individuals are up to. Even during normal times, we don't have to really worry about the crisis. If you would like to use this as a toolkit in your monitoring framework, then you would be able to do so by using transaction data to understand even heterogeneities during normal times. And we will, by doing this, we will draw attention to the heterogeneity originating in consumption and income during the COVID-19 crisis. And this heterogeneity comes from different things. I will show you results from income, age, housing tenure, and regions. The heterogeneity associated with both consumption and income coming from these perspectives, and some evidence towards rising inequality. I will present to you 6 main results. So here is a summary of them. There is a sharp decline in spending during the COVID crisis. Basically, this is from the middle of March until basically now. And this should not come as a surprise to anybody, because we were restricted with our consumption. We had to stay home. We had to cut on spending on restaurants. We had to cut on spending on going to theaters. But an indicative thing that we find when we analyze the data is that the largest decline in consumption comes before the lockdown. So this might be due to many things. It might be because of uncertainty of individuals not being sure about what's going to happen, or also they anticipated the lockdown because other countries already implemented lockdowns before the UK. And the second result is that there is a big spending drop concentrated in retail, restaurants, hospitality, and entertainment sectors. And this, again, should come as no surprise, because we cannot go to hotels anymore. We cannot really go to cinemas anymore. But also, what we pay attention to here is that this is a pure speculation right now. I'm not going to show you any results related to that. But we think that these sectors typically employ low earners. So those are the hardest ones to be hit. In the third result, I'm going to show you that consumption change differs a lot depending on if you own a house or if you're renting, if you are young or older, and depending on where you live in the United Kingdom. Afterwards, we are going to, so the first 3 bullet points mostly cover the part about consumption decline. Then we will slowly go towards the income results. And first, I will show you the heterogeneity in consumption related to income. So what we see is that high earners cut their spending the most, and they're the ones driving the drop in aggregate consumption. The main reason for that is that high earners have a consumption basket that is more dominated by non-essential goods. They are the ones going to restaurants more. They are the ones going for traveling and spending money for hotels more, or they're the ones going for cruises. So they are the ones driving the drop in aggregate consumption. And I will show you some results on income. And income starts falling, and I will elaborate on that later. And once we put income and consumption together, we can make judgments as to what's happening to people's savings. And savings increase for high earners. I can even pull you 3-4 headlines related to that from FT and other blogs already. That is the indication in the economy right now. But also borrowing increases for low earners because they're not able to sustain their consumption because they were already not earning and spending that much. That increases inequality. So we have more analysis in the paper that I'm not going to present to you today, more on the extensive and intensive margin of income and financing needs. And before I elaborate more and getting onto the results, which I'm going to remind to you later, that I'm going to present to you results that are a bit of a mixed bag. So if you look at the CPR discussion paper that we released, the results were until the end of April. Now, since then, we got data updates, and we were able to update our results until the end of May at some point, and then end of June. We actually have results until the end of June. But currently, the results I'm going to show you will be mostly from an interim update with the May data, but also will draw some attention to the results that we have in the CPR discussion paper. We're about to update our paper towards the end of this month with the analysis with the June data. So stay tuned for that one. I will now walk you through this list, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that this thing that we are doing, you're looking at high frequency transaction data, is definitely now one of a kind currently in the literature. These papers that I listed over here, and probably many more that I might have missed, are looking at some sort of transaction level data to look into mostly spending, but there are some papers related to income aspects of the COVID-19 crisis as well. And Paolo made me realize recently that probably at no point in our careers, hopefully never, we will have this many papers written in the same year, basically in the first 6 months of the year. So all of these papers were done in very short notice, but most of them are very good. And I'm sure there are other analyses for other countries on the way. Okay, so the methodology is that we are using transaction level data from a fintech company. It's called Money Dashboard. And Money Dashboard is basically providing their users an app. It's a free app you can download to your phone. The way that users use it is to manage their finances. If you're wondering how much you're spending on restaurants or on traveling, you link your bank or debit card accounts, and then it basically merges all the information from different bank accounts, different cards, to one single platform to provide you with nice visuals of your spending, nice pie charts, nice time series. And the cool thing about this data is that there are transaction labels. So you spend something on restaurants or traveling, or you go to Waitrose or Tesco for your groceries, we're able to see a very granular categorization in the data as to what kind of spending you're doing, and also what kind of merchant you purchase something from. Of course, not all merchants are defined here. If you're going to a pub in Scottish Highlands, you might not be able to see that there. But if you go to one of the chains here, then you would be able to see that. And individuals' transactions are collected, and we get monthly data updates currently, thanks to the goodwill of the data provider. And we restrict ourselves with the good accounts, meaning that we want people to consistently and reliably use the app. There are obviously things that you need to authorize the app to get your data from your online banking account and such. So we restrict ourselves to over 30,000 individuals in the analysis you're going to see today. We are doing some more analysis around that because income obviously is a different thing to consider. So spending is easier to observe, income isn't. So we are doing a bit more sensitivity check around that 30,000 number. It is, I think, 30,500 actually in this analysis. And that gives us, after elimination of some interesting transactions, a sample of 8 million transactions only in 2020. And this data set is anonymized. We don't know who these individuals are. We only observe their partial postcode, the outward postcode, and their year of birth. And there are some, obviously, there are some information. If you're getting your income from Bank of England, the transaction description would say Bank of England. That is removed by the data provider. So we really don't have any idea who these people are. This is virtually real-time data. We are able to see everybody's transactions the next day and 2 days after a weekend, because weekend transactions are a bit late. So you are basically getting a virtually real-time indicator of spending. If you compare this with surveys and national statistics, this is quite impressive because they come with a big significant delay. Of course, COVID-19 urged many institutions to run surveys in shorter time periods right now, so have the results in the next week. But we still think that observing what people are doing rather than asking them what they're doing is actually a good way of measuring their behavior. Let me show you some quick charts from the data, because this is important, because it is an app. So it is your choice to go and register yourself with the app. We cannot measure if these people are more financially minded than others. There is no way of knowing this, given we don't know who they are, where they work. But we know certain things. So for example, you're seeing the regions where these Money Dashboard users are living. And if you if you look at the percentage of the population that uses Money Dashboard, you see a clear indication that they are concentrated around Greater London and also southeast and southwest of the UK. And if you go forward, I can show you the age of these people. They tend to be younger. So this is not quite a density. This is literally a chart that shows you how many users are in each bucket. And on average, these people are 39 years old. And if you look at the main mass, people are generally around 25 to 50 years old in the data, which might not be as representative as national statistics. And if you look at people's salary ranges that they put when they're registering with the app, or if they don't, the Money Dashboard goes and runs some algorithms to be able to infer their salaries. There is some skewness towards the right side. So these people tend to be higher earners, reminding you the median income in the UK is 29,600 gross income. And this is basically, we still see this as being representative, given the majority of the mass is here in the middle in the green line between 20 to 30K. But we cannot obviously deny that this data is skewed towards higher earners. That said, we have done some analysis comparing the total expenditure measure of our analysis with the ONS's national statistics. And we didn't seasonally adjust hours, which is the orange dashed line, and the ONS measure is the blue line. You can see that as an index or growth rates, Money Dashboard total expenditure measure bears with some sort of representativeness. And if you look at the simple correlation, obviously it's not very long data, but there is almost 80% correlation between two, which is encouraging despite the caveats of the data. Okay, so before going through my results, I'm going to remind you, maybe you don't need reminding, but I needed, remind you the COVID timeline of the United Kingdom. So the national lockdown came on the 23rd of March. But before that, there were softer measures in place. For example, on the 15th of March, elderly and vulnerable people, like, for example, sick people or pregnant women, were asked to shield themselves for the next 12 weeks. And then immediately a day after, government advised us to cut all the non-essential travel. Do not go to the pubs, people, and don't go to restaurants or cinemas. And schools started to close. And we were asked to work from home whenever we can. And afterwards, 4 days later, pubs, cafes, and restaurants, bars, gyms were officially closed. So then, 23rd of March, national lockdown hits. There was a tiny bit of an easing on the 14th of May, which was basically the government said, if you were not able to work from home but you were not an essential worker that worked through national lockdown, please, you can go back to work. And some businesses opened, but not that many. Some garden centers, for example, opened. And on the 15th of June, more relaxation happened. High street retailers, some open markets and department stores and some indoor markets were able to open. And on the 4th of July, which we were all probably expecting with great joy, full relaxation happened. And now we can go to restaurants and pubs and hairdressers under interesting guidance. Okay, so remembering this COVID timeline, and I put a red line over here for the lockdown start, which marks 23rd of March. And the green one, lockdown ease, marks the 14th of May, which is not a big relaxation, remember. But I'm showing you the results until end of May right now. That's why that's the only relaxation we have in the data, although the June update will have others. So we see a sharp decline in consumption. This is total expenditure excluding recurring bills being council tax, some things that you have a standing order to pay in the first week of the month, which makes these charts very zigzaggy because you end up with high spending in the first week. So we remove that. And here are the non-durables the same way and services the same way. And these are weekly spending. And this is an index for the second week of January being 100. The first week of January, right after Christmas and New Year's, is a bit noisy. So we normalize to second week of January. And in the red dash line over here, you're seeing 2019 levels. And here is the 2020 levels in blue. And even just eyeballing, you don't even have to calculate what kind of percentage decline it is. There is a huge percentage decline in all kinds of spending. And this spending decline started before lockdown hit. So the decline started before 29th of March. This marks the week before, the week of 16th of March, when we were actually asked to for social distancing and when we were asked to work from home. Services is the same. Non-durables, there is a pickup over here, and you'll see in 2 slides later that it comes from grocery shopping, as you might have expected. But wherever you look at in these charts, you see a big decline in all sorts of spending when lockdown hit and during lockdown. But there are declines in some expense types, as I mentioned. So what you're seeing in the y-axis of these 4 charts now is pound spending for each week. And I thought it would be interesting to see how much on average people are spending on retail or restaurants. So that's why I wanted to put that rather than an index. And people were spending roughly around 55 pounds before lockdown, around winter time, both in 2019 and 2020. And obviously, as summer comes, 2019 numbers go up as people are able to go out for restaurants more, probably. But in 2020, we see a huge decline. Sorry, I'm talking about, this is retail, this is restaurants, but it's the same story. It's basically, for both retail and restaurants, as summer comes, you do more spending, there is some seasonality. But for both restaurants and retail, there's a huge decline in spending. And most of it hitting before lockdown started, especially if you look at restaurants, when people realize probably that lockdown is coming and they're asked to social distance and other countries are going through big trouble, they stopped going to restaurants. An interesting pattern emerges in travel and holiday expenses. So when lockdown started, obviously it was in historic lows because people started cutting their consumption of travel, spending on travel and holidays long before. If you had a ticket to go and visit Japan or Thailand, some of these countries started experiencing lockdowns and measures even before the UK. So you started canceling your travel plans. But what is interesting is that during lockdown, during especially the first weeks of April, we were able to see that people were booking holidays for the second part of the year. And when we focused on transaction descriptions, you were able to see that people were hopeful and they were planning to go for cruises. So you see a big pickup on travel expenses from that. And recreation and culture, this is a big group, but this also covers theaters, cinemas, concerts. And you can see that it was mostly around 35 pounds a week of spending, and it went down to, on average, 25, 26 pounds. Of course, the picture is not that bad for other types of spending. So we were stuck at home and we were able to buy more from Amazon and eBay. We concentrated for those two because it is not that easy to see if someone is buying something from Waitrose online or by going to the store because they were both open. So that's why we had to limit ourselves to this. And also during normal times, for example, you're not able to easily see if someone is shopping online from Marks and Spencer or John Lewis versus physical shopping. So we limit ourselves to only Amazon, eBay, which we know obviously are online. And you can see that there is a pickup here in spending right after lockdown started. When it comes to groceries, it should definitely not be surprising because I remember waiting in the line for 35 minutes to be able to pay before lockdown hit. There is a big spike over here, but then the level goes back to normal. We see a bit of a decline over here, but if you look at the smoothed data over a month, it disappears. People definitely kept themselves busy during lockdown, and they were able to do more housework and invest on their gardens. So this is what you're seeing here. There is a bit of seasonality in the data. In 2019, this spending goes up as the weather gets better. But during lockdown, people ordered more things to basically plant herbs and flowers in their gardens and do some housework. And this has been in the news. I couldn't dig my headline news for this, but I remember seeing very vividly that alcohol consumption went up, and it was up for other spending data analysis as well. You can see that the expense associated with alcohol and tobacco consumption went up considerably during lockdown. Just to give you a quick summary of what I have been talking about, and also showing you some other expense type that we explored but I didn't show. These are the total declines from March to May 2020, in March and May to 2020 compared to March and May 2019. So in total expenditure, we see a 35% decline. In total expenditure excluding bills is 40%. And if you look at transportation and fuel, it is 25%, 24.5%. Durable consumption went down by 14.5%. But as I mentioned, some of them, for example, online shopping, DIY, and others went up during this process. Okay, so after giving you the aggregate results, as I promised, I'm going to show you the heterogeneity in spending. And it is definitely not homogeneous at all. So if you look here on the left-hand side chart, we split aggregate spending to three different categories. First one are the mortgages. Remember, we have transaction data, so we see if people are paying mortgages, and then infer that they are actually paying debt down. And we also have renters. We see rent payments, which are clearly labeled as rental payments. And we have some transactions that we don't know what they are. So obviously, it is difficult to observe someone's transactions if someone owns the house and they do not pay anything for it. So we leave that unidentified. If you look into this chart, before lockdown started, mortgagors were already enjoying a higher level of spending, which might be expected. They are likely to be people with kids, and they are likely to be higher earners maybe. So they were enjoying a higher level of spending. But before lockdown hit, the cut in consumption is more pronounced for them compared to, for example, renters. So the percentage decline here is much larger. And the gap between the consumption level is not as high as the pre-lockdown, because they also had to cut some spending, and renters and other people who were not able to consume as much had to cut some spending as well. And if you look into the age figure for consumption, you'll see that older people had a higher level of spending already, and middle basically is below 47, above 31. And they are also having a higher spending than younger individuals. And they had to, these two groups, younger and older, middle aged and older individuals, had to cut their spending, or they chose to cut their spending more than the younger individuals. By the way, let me remind you that the data is skewed towards high younger people. So obviously, older being defined as above 47 is definitely by no means a big definition that we accept widely, but it has to be that way, because otherwise we just we don't have enough individuals on the upper side of the distribution. So we had to do basically upper 25th percentile and lower 25th percentile. Then, if we look into heterogeneity with respect to regions, what you see here is the decline in total expenditure compared to the 2019 levels. And the red and orange ones are worse than the yellow ones. And the orange and red ones are concentrated around London area, London and surroundings. So we can basically say that Greater London and South East have been the most affected regions. And once we do a bit more analysis on that, we definitely see that those areas were cutting their spending more. All right, so this brings us to the end of this first part that I was talking about, just consumption results. And now we are slowly transitioning towards merging consumption with the income analysis. And here on the right-hand side chart, the line chart, I'm showing you how people's consumption changed depending on their income. So the blue line basically tells you the spending of people who are earning more than 50K. And on the lower part of the distribution, we have individuals that earn less than 20K, and we have the interquartile range between these top 25th and low 25th percentiles, and you have the orange line for that. So it is consistent with what I have been showing you, that mortgagors or older people cut spending more, and that translates into higher earners as well. So higher earners were spending £500 a week roughly before lockdown, and then they had to cut their consumption to £300 first and almost to £250 afterwards. And in the middle income individuals, they had a huge gap with the higher earner ones, but they also cut their consumption over here. And at the end of the in the beginning of the lockdown, these three groups started to get closer to one another in terms of spending levels. And if we calculate how much of the consumption change is associated with higher earners cutting their income, the blue part of the pie chart, the blue part corresponds to that. So high earners cut spending by the whole spending cut in consumption, 46% of it is coming from top earners, and only 13.5% is coming from the low income individuals. The reason being is that it is easier to cut or postpone non-essential spending, some of it which are by default restricted by the government's lockdown mandate. So if you're not able to go to restaurants, you're not going to be able to obviously spend. Sorry, I just got the Q&A box, but I am still not able to see it. So if there is anything there, David, can you please let me know if something burning that I need to address? Because when I click on it, I can't really see anything in the Q&A box. Okay, I will continue until David nudges me.
If you just continue, then I'll raise this question.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So towards the end of the analysis, as I mentioned, we're going to bring consumption and income analysis together, and then we will start talking about income. So here you're seeing box charts. These are a bit peculiar, so let me walk you through it. Here you see the change in main salary, and you see change in overall income. So what we see in the transaction is that someone gets their main salary, but they might have a secondary salary, or they might have other types of income. For example, they might have benefits, or they might have rental income, interest income, or some other types of income that you can think of. So we split them to salary, main, and overall income. And the box charts are telling you the change in salary in pounds on the left and in percentage change terms on the right-hand side from 1 month to another. So if February 2020 is here, this means that the salary changed this much. This is the distribution of the change of salary from January to February. And then going forward, this is the change between February and March, and this is the change between March and April. So let's just focus on this for the time being. From January to February, the median change, which is the horizontal black bar here, is around 0. And interquartile range, which is the box, which is the middle 50%, is quite symmetric, maybe a bit skewed towards towards positive numbers, but there is not much to see there. And the distribution is quite tight with the whiskers. But if you go from February to March, you see that the decline for some people in salary becomes apparent. So the median change is around 0. So more people just have zero change in their salary, but some people starts having troubles and the whiskers extending towards the left of the distribution. And from March to April, now you see a bigger decline in salary. And the whisker in both ways, to be perfectly honest. But what worries us is the distribution getting wider because people are losing their jobs. And here is the percentage change that basically tells you the same story. So this tells us that from March to April, there is almost, I think I checked this number, it's 17.5% decline in salary. And it is similar, if not worse, in overall income. The percentage change in overall income is around 30%. That includes other types of income. So now putting expenditure and income together again, say we calculate an average total expenditure and average total income for the whole nation that we can observe as much as we can. And January being 100, you can see this kind of trajectory for income. February level is higher than January level because generally people get bonuses in February, but then salary starts going down. Expenditure, on the other hand, from February to March, there's a huge decline in expenditure, which is more pronounced than the decline in income. So the drop in consumer spending has been quite large, and it has been faster than the drop in income. And that tells us something about the savings rate. So we basically group people according to their salary in February 2020. And we say the lower part of the distribution is the lower 10th percentile. The upper part of the distribution is the upper 90th, and we have the median over here as the blue line that you see over here. And we impute some rents and other things. So we come up with a total expenditure measure, and we look how much people spend during that time and what kind of income they get, and we basically construct a proxy for savings rate. So I will ask for you for a second to concentrate on the y-axis here. There are a couple of reasons. First, as I mentioned, we're doing more work on income. But second, remember, we have individuals, we don't have households. So although it might be perfectly reasonable for a young person living with their parents to save 60% of their salary in March if they're a high earner, it might not be realistic for someone who's living alone and paying rent. So please look at these lines in relativity. So what we are trying to highlight here is that for a median person, like average person in the data set, we see an increase in savings rate especially pronounced from February going forward. Same thing for people on the top of the income distribution as well. But for the people who are at the bottom of the income distribution, their savings were already quite close to zero, and they started to borrow. They spent more than they earned during April. We also checked credit card usage and such, and overdrafts and other things. So there is definitely some indicative evidence that these people might going towards some external financing needs. But I'm not going to elaborate on that right now before we do the updates to the paper. And the last set of results is the rising income and consumption equality. I have other charts in the appendix that I can show you Gini coefficients or cross-sectional deviations, but I just wanted to put it in perspective what happened to expenditure and income for the people in the bottom part of the income distribution, that is the 10th percentile in orange, and the top part of the income distribution, which is the 90th percentile, shown in green. And if you can see, the log income here is mainly flat. Maybe there is a bit of a decline in April. And the same thing for the average person in the population, which is the median. But then in the bottom of the income distribution, log income starts going down. And in the bottom of the income distribution, log expenditure starts going down from March to April, more so in relative terms than the people who are earning more. So low-income individuals are getting more constrained, especially in April. and that basically raises more inequality. So to sum up, which I think I am going to be a bit early even, that we observe a huge decline in consumption, especially in March and April, and it somehow stabilizes later on. And of course, once we update the results, you can see it in the paper, but we have some indicative evidence that there is some pickup, especially in some sort of spending. The total consumption is still quite subdued compared to 2019 levels, but there is some room for hope. And largest decline takes place before the lockdown. That is the part about anticipation of lockdown and such. And we see that income starts falling, especially in April, with the closures of businesses. And although I haven't shown you, we are preparing the results for this, that there's an increase in benefits, job seeker benefits, family benefits, and definitely universal credit. So we will definitely put those results into the next iteration. And we have evidence from the transaction data that savings are increasing for high earners, while low earners have to borrow to get by, to be able to sustain their level of spending and to be able to pay their rent probably. And we see that the decline in consumption is earlier than the decline in income, which is to be expected. You can cut consumption tomorrow, but we are not going to be able to observe someone's income until the next income is paid into the account. So we see that there is a sharp rise in consumption inequality first, with this differentiation between different parts of the income distribution or housing tenure, but income inequality starts rising as well. So these are my main results, and happy to talk to you all about how you find it and any comments, any work that you would want to see going forward, and I can give you a bit of a sense of what we have in the update as well. Thank you.
Sinem, thank you very much. That was exceptionally clear and super interesting as well. As I said at the beginning, I'd like to invite people to kind of raise their hands in the kind of box, and I'll kind of allow you to talk directly. I'm just going to scan down the list to see if... Okay, so we have Martin Wheel, who is... Martin, I'm going to hand over the mic to you and you can ask your question directly.
Unmute now. So
Hi.
The question I wanted to ask was what you can do to validate the data. For example, the retail sales index has published figures for April and May, showing a sharp fall in April and then a partial recovery in May.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other sources of information which are designed to be comprehensive and might therefore help you establish how representative your data are?
Yeah.
The second thing is, have you thought of reweighting the data to be more representative of the whole population?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Martin. Starting from the last question about reweighting, yes, we thought about it. We haven't done it yet. The reason is that we wanted to basically get it out there a bit soon. So we have something to benchmark everything on, but definitely using some census data and looking at the regions and age and representativeness of how many individuals we have in each area is on the table. We are thinking about that, and also we have been looking at understanding society income measures as well, and there are obviously some weighting going on there as well to be able to make it more comparable. We are definitely thinking about that. The first question, so we looked at retail sales and representativeness on that. We didn't compare our results with that, but we can do that. We have seen some indication that our data is also picking up. One thing that I didn't specifically say here is that obviously it is difficult to say if, for example, I am going and purchasing clothes and that is included in retail. It is difficult to say if people stop using the app or they use a different card to buy the same clothes. So sometimes people drop from what we observe. That's why we have a big cleaning for the data, and we settle around 30,000 individuals. But our indicators are conditional averages. So we generally look into how many people we have for that spending type and take the average. Now we're also working towards finding one number for total retail sales or some other expenditure measures, and then comparing that directly before averaging with 2019 levels. That's going to give us a better indication of both intensive and extensive margin. But I will look into some others. Okay, being at the Bank of England gives me a bit of a advantage here, that we have some in-house indicators as well that Andy Haldane also published in his speech, I think 2 weeks ago. So I definitely have a peek at those very regularly and compare what we do, but obviously they're not something that I would be able to put in the slides or the paper. But whatever I can, we would be able to put into the paper, we will take this on board. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we also have a question from Ethan Ilzetsky. I hope I'm pronouncing your name. I'll just... Ethan, I've just lost your... I think it's actually going to be Jumana Salihin. Jumana?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jumana.
Hi, Sinem.
Hi.
Really interesting paper. Really enjoyed.
Thank you.
The presentation, very clear. I guess I've got two kind of comments really. One, I'm actually quite surprised that the savings rate, I know you said don't focus on the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised they didn't go up a lot more, because when we've seen other sources of evidence, so for example in the US, the savings rate rose up to 33% from sort of 6%. I know it's come back down in the most recent data. And I also saw the Bank of England figures on people's savings in terms of their accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also some evidence on. So I was
Deposits,
that was one thing I was surprised about. So not sure what's going on there. It might be your sample. And I think that the second question is, you kind of said, what would we like to see going forward? I think the biggest question going forward is to what extent, we're going to see spending return in some of the key sectors like retail, restaurants, etc. So I was just wondering, I know you didn't show any of that today, to what extent, and also whether your sample allows you to break that down to give us a sense of going forward. I mean, obviously you can't do it yet, but going forward, how quickly expenditure will come back in those sectors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. So for the saving rate, let me go back to my chart for that. So I mentioned that you shouldn't concentrate on the numbers, because we would like to do some sensitivity and robustness analysis around this, especially with the difficulty of observing income very reliably. The reason why I said that is because for the high earners, for example, you see almost 55% as savings. And for a median individual, it is above 40%, which, as I said, there might be some reality to it. And on average, for people living in the same household, maybe you're saving someone's salary and then spending from your husband's account, for example. So there are things like this that we need to smooth our analysis to. Obviously, we cannot really take this into account, but we can select the users such that we are completely comfortable with the numbers as well. I am sure the trajectory is not going to change, but the numbers might. So in relative terms, they're going to stay very similar, but I cannot easily say that savings rate in the UK went up by 55%, although it is a big number. And I just wanted to in a way, cushion myself against that criticism, because we are aware that we need to do a bit more work on this. That's why. And at the end, if we find 40-50%, that basically aligns with your intuition that it might actually go up, because as Bank of England said, deposits in the banks went up in historical highs. So it is definitely, there is some indication that savings rate, forced savings, not even precautionary savings, are going up. And the second part, going forward, the indication in our analysis right now with the June data, and hopefully we're going to have the first half of July until last weekend, for the first 2 weeks of July, there is some indication that some expenses pick up, and one of them being retail for sure. Even starting in May, when we define the analysis a bit better, in early June especially, when we analyze the data for June, we saw that there is some sort of a very wide V-shape recovery in retail. I don't remember restaurants perfectly. There is definitely some pickup, but I don't think that's a V-shaped recovery in restaurants. We will definitely, I will make sure that I'll send you our results even before the paper is out. So you can have a look and tell us if that fits to your priors, due to what's happening to retail and restaurants. Thanks again for the questions, both Martin and Jumana. More? I think there...
Yeah, there's certainly one from Ethan. I'm going to try and unmute you now, Ethan.
Yes.
Okay, I think
Hi.
It works now. Hi.
Yes.
Thanks for a great presentation. It's really interesting data and really interesting findings. I had a couple of questions about your message about consumptions. So you talked about there being differential effects on mortgagors versus renters, and high income versus low income. But in percentage term, I mean, just eyeballing your figures, it looked exactly the same. It was about a 50% decline in both of those. So here it goes down from 500 to 250 for the rich, but it goes down from about 250 to about 120, to about 150 for the poor. I mean, it's jumping around a bit, but it doesn't look, I think you should really show this in logs to get a good sense. Yeah. And then again, with the mortgagors, it was the same. It was basically the same percent decline. Then I really got confused at the very end, where your last bullet point was that consumption inequality increased, but if anything, you're arguing on these figures that consumption inequality decreased, aren't you?
So not really. So maybe I can go to one of the charts that I put at the end. Sorry, it's going to take a bit. Okay, so I didn't want to put these in there because I wasn't sure if I would have the time to go through them. We can go back to what you said in the beginning, but starting from the inequality part. So if you look into the difference between the 19th and 10th percentiles of the income distribution when it comes to consumption, this is the increase in consumption level, increase in inequality, increase in the difference between the 90th and 10th percentiles. Whoever is in the 90th percentile is able to consume more, and whoever was in the 10th percentile was not able to consume more. So if you take the differences between them, the inequality actually is more apparent here. And when you look into the cross-sectional standard deviation, it again increases massively here. And I have the same things for income. Obviously, this is a monthly frequency. We are doing some work to understand this may decline. As I mentioned, this is the work on income. But if you concentrate on April part, so the cross-sectional standard deviation from January to April between the rich and the poor, and the difference between 90th and 10th percentiles between the rich and poor is going up. So glad you asked. Maybe I should have shown these. Apologies for that. But there is definitely some consumption change. But at the same time, I didn't show you the results in income change. So I didn't put them here on purpose. As I said, I didn't want to show you the results that we're working on right now, but also we're seeing a lot of income loss in the lower part of the income distribution as well. So although the cut in consumption might look similar, which I am going to work on and present in a different chart so people would be able to see at least year on year how much people's income and consumption changes, or for mortgages or for renters. But at the same time, people lose their jobs at the same time. So even if it is just consumption, it doesn't give a full picture of what is happening to inequality. And I think these two charts are better in that sense. But point well made, and point definitely taken, that we should maybe show them in a different format that is more clear and that brings consumption and income together in a better way. So the inequality is more apparent.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have another question from Martin. Martin, I'll hand the mic back to you.
Sorry, I wanted to know your answer to Jemana's question raised quite a lot of doubts in my mind. Could you please put back the slide showing savings ratios?
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, what's worrying me about this is that if I look at the pre-COVID period, say January 2020, you're showing savings ratios very different from those in the national accounts. I'm not sure exactly of the latest figure in the national accounts, but it's somewhere around 0. And if you leave out contractual saving, it may well be negative. Whereas you're showing a median figure of about 0.3, 30%.
Yes, so I'm not sure about the national accounts saving figure right now. I didn't check that. That's why I mentioned this to be a relative chart. So I should have probably done a different axis thing over here, but it is the relativity that is important. That's why I mentioned, as it was a disclaimer, that maybe the numbers should be just seen relatively, that these people in the median, say these were around 30%, and these people around 40%. So 3 units these guys save, 4 units high earners save. That's what I am saying. So please do not put much emphasis on the percentage. If this presentation is a week later, I would have shown you different results. But currently, I cannot easily say that, okay, these people in the top of the income distribution settled around 55% savings rate. I can for sure say that their savings is much more than the median person and the person who's at the bottom of the income distribution. And there's a huge gap in between them. And for median income person and the high income person, the difference is not that stark when it comes to savings, regardless of what they're saving. But their saving structure is much different than the low earner ones. So this is the main message that I was trying to pass on.
Well, yes, but I'm worried that might not be the case. It could simply be that the degree of underreporting is of underreporting of consumption or of underreporting of income is different from the different categories, and it may well be changing over time. I think in essence you have the same problem as trying to estimate savings from the living costs and food survey, where we know there's underreporting of consumption, but we don't know who's doing the underreporting.
But we do observe these people's consumption alongside their income. Well, we have a measure for their total consumption and the bills they pay, and other. For example, we know that if they're paying divorce settlement or if they're paying their partner child fees, so we know what they're spending on, and then we observe if they're getting 3,000 versus 5,000 pounds income inflows to their accounts. We observe that. Well, so. Maybe we might, again, this is a financial app. So if they didn't link all of their accounts, then of course we might be missing some of their consumption. But at the same time, we filter users against that. So we are trying to keep good accounts throughout 2020, especially. So we observe their consumption in a reliable way.
But then you must be saying, unless I'm quite wrong and something strange has happened to the savings ratio before the epidemic, then you must be saying that these people are very unrepresentative.
We haven't weighted these people depending on how representative they are, but there is definitely some representativeness in the high part of the higher income level. So these are not, so for example, people you see in the green, it's not just 100 or 200 people. There are quite a lot of people in 30,000 people buckets that are, especially given that our data is slightly skewed towards high earners, there is definitely quite a lot of people in the top 10th percentile.
Well, no, I'm not worried about it not being a large number or a small number of people. The question is whether they're representative of the people who haven't joined Money Dashboard.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, of course. Yeah, I take that. As I said, there is not much of a way of checking it. We can definitely tell you what their median, for example, for the top 10th percentile, we can tell you how much their median salary is. So we can check the top 10th percentile of the UK income distribution, which is definitely, it won't be that high. So people in Money Dashboard, the 10th percentile of the income distribution, will have a higher, much higher salary than the representative population in the United Kingdom, because the 10th percentile is not that high for the United Kingdom. Definitely. So it is not the top 10th percentile of UK population, it's the 10th percentile of people in the data, which is definitely a high, which gives us high level of income for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're almost out of time. I see Jumana has her hand up as well. Jumana, I'll hand it to you if you can.
I think there are stuff in the chat box as well. So I'm happy to stay.
I'll pass that to you afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, Jumana.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, it was just to say that the savings rate in Q1 was about 5%, just to
good to know. Yes.
To Martin's point. But I think the point that Martin's making is just, we know that surveys don't measure the savings rate well.
Yeah.
And so there'll just be a big question about this. So, the emphasis of your paper might end up having to be slightly different. That's all. It's a quick comment. Thank you.
I say thanks. Thank you.
I think we should draw it to a close because we're out of time now. Let me first of all thank Sinem for a really fascinating talk. We'll await the next draft of this paper with a lot of interest. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And whomever I couldn't reply to, as I said, I didn't really see, please drop me an email and I'm happy to talk to you offline. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk again. And thanks for all the questions and comments.
Cool. Excellent. And
take care.
So thanks from me to all the participants. I'll just say briefly that we're going to take a break in our online seminar series for the rest of the summer. So we'll be kicking off again on the 21st of September with Domenico Giannoni. So that should be a fascinating talk. Thank you all very much and see you in a few months. Bye-bye.